Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hi, everyone. This is Chris Quarto, and welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. Thanks for joining me. Well, as you may know, this is a podcast series where I interview 4 therapists who are taking the plunge into private practice. And I'm interviewing each of them once a month throughout the course of 2017. And the whole idea is for you as the journey followers to listen to these podcast episodes and to learn from their experiences. So if you decide at some point that, hey, I want to take the plunge into private practice too, that you'll know what to do. Well, my guest today is Debby Simmons, and she's a licensed marriage and family therapist in Burlingame, California, which is a suburb of San Francisco. And I think that you'll like her story. Hers is a little bit different from the previous 3 therapists that you've listened to because she's already been in private practice, but she's doing something different. So let's listen and see what Debby is up to. Well, Debby, if you wouldn't mind, I always ask my guests to say a little bit about themselves and what they do for a living. So let's hear about you.
Okay, sure. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice, and actually in Burlingame, California, which is in a little south of San Francisco.
All right.
I've been in private practice since 1993, and I see adults, families, couples, children, adolescents. I've really done the gamut of work over the years. I have a subspecialty of eating disorders. I do grief counseling, so a variety of different things. And I've also been an educator. I've taught in high schools for many, many years.
Oh, wow.
And I've done university teaching, and I do some online graduate teaching right now.
Okay, so you do a lot of different things in your role.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about you, Debby, in comparison to the other therapists that I've interviewed so far, you've actually been in private practice for quite some time, since 1993. The difference for you, though, is that there is a new journey starting for you. And maybe you could say a little bit about what that new journey is.
Absolutely. It's launching this week. So
okay.
I'm taking my practice to a group practice model, and we are called Primrose Healing and Wellness. And I have therapists who are going to be working for me, and we are right now. I've got 5 people, including a person doing Reiki, actually working for me, and we're just beginning the journey this week.
Oh wow! How exciting is that? And I want to
totally
hear.
Exciting.
Oh, I bet it is, and I want to hear more about that. But before we get into all of that, let's just kind of look at you a little bit more, so the listeners can kind of learn about who you are. And one of the things I like is to talk to therapists about their stories, about how they became interested in going into the helping profession, and what got them thinking about private practice. But let's just kind of look at that first question first, Debby, about what got you interested in the helping profession.
It's a simple answer for me, and it goes back to high school. I took a high school psychology class, and from that point on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So when I went to college, I was a psych major, and I knew I wanted to. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it at that point, but I did majored in psychology and education, because I was also going into teaching. I was doing both things. I knew very early on, and I never wavered.
Well, you're a lot like me, because I that was my major, was psychology, and I wanted to teach psychology in high school. And so we kind of have similar paths that way. What was it? Do you remember, if you can kind of think back to that psychology class that you took in high school? What was it about that class that you think may have kind of sparked your interest in wanting to help people?
I think the class was called Literature and Psychology or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of the focus was, I learned a lot about psychopathology, and that was always one of my favorite classes. And
Sure.
I just thought, I was just fascinated with it, and I knew I wanted to study more and learn more.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, and when I took the psychology classes in college and then went to do my student teaching experience, I had to teach psychology to high school juniors and seniors. And I remember teaching about abnormal psychology, and of course they're all fascinated with that, kind of like what you were in high school. And I remember as the teacher, though, as the student teacher, feeling like a hypocrite because I had never worked with people with bipolar or generalized anxiety or whatever it was. I never worked with these kind of people. So I felt like a real hypocrite teaching that. And I thought after the experience, you know what? Instead of going into teaching right away, I should probably get some experience working with these people, and so that's why I decided to go into counseling. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? How the paths kind of go that way. And so you went
absolutely,
you ended up doing psychology in college, and then so what happened after that? You took the psychology courses, and then what?
Well, as soon as I graduated from college with my BA, I was offered a teaching job in a private school. It was very unexpected that I got offered the job, but so I started teaching right away. So I was teaching in religion and health and psychology and did a lot of different things. But I also went back to school or stayed in school to get my master's in counseling and my teaching credential at the same time.
Okay.
So I was, once I had my master's, then I was doing a lot of the school counseling. But I knew that I needed the teaching sort of as my full-time job, but I knew I wanted to do the counseling. And I thought if I could get an internship in private practice, that would be the ideal combination. And that's what I was able to do.
Oh, wow, man, you were really lucky then to be able to do that. We have, I teach in a counseling program here in Tennessee, and we have very few opportunities for our students to work in private practice because the whole payment and reimbursement thing, and so we don't have that opportunity a lot. I wish we did, but we don't here. So, but that was nice that worked out for you. So. Okay, so you at some point in time you were teaching, but then you kind of transitioned into a different role, a role as a counselor full time in private practice. So tell us a little bit about what attracted you to private practice. Why did you want to go that route as opposed to maybe working in an agency or something like that?
Well, my private practice was my part-time private practice was doing pretty well. And I also was getting a little tired of teaching high school. I'd been teaching it for many, many years. And I decided at the same time that I went into to take my practice full-time that I was going to go back and get my doctorate. And I did that in health psychology at the same time that I went into private practice full-time. And I really just took a leap of faith. I quit my teaching job and said, I'm going to do this. And I was lucky, and I do not take that for granted at all.
Right.
I was very lucky that I was able to build that practice to a full-time practice.
Kind of looking back, because you said that when it was still part-time, that it was pretty successful. And I just kind of wonder, what kind of work were you doing in private practice at that time when you were just doing it part-time? And why do you think you were so successful?
I was doing a lot of work with adolescents and families at that time. And I was also doing a lot of grief counseling, and I had a connection through our local church. I think what made it successful was because I'd been working with adolescents for so many years.
Sure.
That's what I knew. The other thing that I did was, marketing was part of it, but I decided at that point, as a new therapist that getting on insurance panels was probably a good idea. I don't think that today, but back then, I think it's what got me started, and
Sure.
It kept my practice going.
Kind of looking at private practice, Debbie, when you think about, personal and professional advantages, what do you think are some of those advantages for you?
Well, I think the flexibility for sure, making my own hours, being my own boss.
Right.
I think financially, you asked about why didn't I go for an agency or something like that. You can't make money in this business in an agency or nonprofit. And I think if you, in private practice, you can make a decent living. And so there's, that financial plus. There's downsides for sure. But I just think, I love working for myself and just having that freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I just finished my master's degree. It was back in 1984. And taking a job in community mental health, and I think I started off at $15,000. So, it's how do you live? And where I lived at that time was just a very small community with about maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people. So it's not like there was a lot I could do or spend my money on, but still, that wasn't much money. So I think you're right. I think that private practice does offer that as a possibility, especially if that you were successful and you were able to build this up to the point of being able to do it on a full-time basis. Now you're at the point you've done this for quite a number of years, and now you're making this transition to something that's new for you, to a group practice. And I wonder, Debbie, if you could talk a little bit about what kind of preparation went into changing from a solo practice to a group practice.
Well, I'd always I've had interns who've worked for me, mostly because I knew that I had that opportunity when I was an intern, and I always wanted to give back.
Sure.
And I like to teach. So interns have always been part of my practice. I knew that I was pretty much financially and just capped out at my practice. I couldn't do much more than what I was doing. And I actually went to a workshop where somebody got up and basically is talking about, what financial success of therapists. And this one gentleman got up and he talked about the group practice model, which I had really never entertained before. But I went and talked to him afterwards, and I was just very intrigued, and I came home and I started thinking about it, and I'm thinking, I kind of have a group practice in a way. I've got two interns who are working for me, and I'm wondering if I could expand that a little bit. And I was thinking, if I had people work for me and we talk about, a fee split, well, that would be great for me. But then I was thinking, well, who would want to do that? Why would somebody want to come and work for me and do a fee split? And then the more I kind of kept thinking that through, it's because I have all the overhead. I'm paying the rent. I'm doing, it's like they don't have to do any of that. And that could be very appealing, particularly for newly licensed people.
Exactly.
So that when I was able to figure that piece out, then I really believed that yes, people will want to come work for me and they will want to do this. Then I just began the process of seeing financially if I could afford another office, some more office space, and then I started hiring people, and here we are today I got 5 people working for me.
Holy cow. That's wonderful. That's, and I think that you inspire a lot of people who want to do that, Debbie, because, in the Journey followers who listen to this podcast episode, we have people who have never been in private practice, who have been thinking about doing this. But then we have other people who have, similar to you, and that want to do the same thing, is maybe go the group private practice route, perhaps for the same reasons, maybe for different reasons. But it sounds like it's certainly possible to do this with proper preparation, and it sounds like you went to a workshop and you had the opportunity to talk to somebody to do that. And I imagine that talking to others who have done this, that's an important thing to do and it's part of this preparation, huh?
I definitely think that that's a part of it. In fact, the gentleman that I talked to really put me in touch with, with some Facebook. There's a group practice page on Facebook, and that has been immensely helpful because there's other people out there who are trying this and they're talking about their struggles, and so that made it a lot easier for me to move forward as well.
Sure, exactly. Well, this I imagine that when you do this kind of thing, when you first started the private practice, and then again when you started thinking about doing the group private practice, there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions that you experience up until the time that you finally take the plunge and say, okay, here we go, we're going to do this. Talk a little bit about some of the thoughts and feelings that you were experiencing up until this point in time, and even now, just kind of starting this new adventure off for yourself here.
Well, for me, it was, I really believe that that we as therapists, that we doubt ourselves a lot and doubt what we're capable of doing, for, like, even on a financial in a financial way. And I think that one of the things that I knew in this process was I knew that this was the right thing. I don't know what kind of pulled me into it, but it was the right thing. And I believed in it, and I have hope and faith in it. Of course, there's fear that goes along with it, but the fear is only about, I say only about the financial piece. I mean, there's a risk. There's no question,
right.
But other than that piece, though, to me, I just know that it's the right thing, and it's exciting. I love my work. The people that I'm going to be working with, they got excited. It's not like I'm just going out and hiring people for the sake of doing it. I mean, I had them all over here last night at my place, and everybody was excited about this whole process. And that is going to make a really big difference.
I bet. Well, you were talking about that risk factor before, and I suspect that as a person who wants to join your group practice, the obvious benefit for them is that they don't have quite as much of a risk as you do, having to be the one that's paying the rent and the bills and, all that kind of stuff. So you're taking on more of that than they are. But I'm kind of wondering, kind of looking at this from the group practice perspective, how do you know who you want to be part of your group practice? How do you think about, I kind of want this kind of a person, and I don't want that kind of a person. But take us through that a little bit, Debbie, about the thought processes, about how you go about selecting or choosing people to be part of your group private practice.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, our practice is the focus of it is we're taking a holistic approach to psychotherapy.
All right.
So we've got skilled clinicians, but we're really looking at them, the physical piece, the spiritual piece, the emotional piece. There's all the different components. I think we as therapists, we do that anyway, but that's really the focus that I'm putting out. And I think a lot of people, especially out here in California, a lot of people are buying into the holistic concept of wellness.
Right.
And so the first thing that I did was when I was looking for people and I started advertising, that was the focus. And so they needed to buy kind of into that. And so different people, there were interns who were applying, but I knew I didn't want interns.
Right.
I wanted people who really had a passion about this. And some people, the thing that everybody coming into my practice, I'm asking them to do is they have to do 2 hours of marketing a month. So they have to buy into the growing concept of this. So some people didn't want that. They just kind of wanted to go to work and they wanted clients to be given to them. And I'm not just giving clients to people. We're all working on kind of growing this. So it was mostly about, their skill level needed to be there for sure.
Sure.
But it was them being passionate about wanting this organization to really grow and to be part of something at the ground floor level.
Yeah, and that's really different, isn't it? For therapists who have never been in private practice before, in particular, the whole concept of of the business, the marketing aspect. It's not something that they're used to, and it can be a real turnoff to some people.
Yeah, and that's where I really like some of the people that I have, they have not been in private practice, and I think that's something that they want to do down the line. So a lot of what I'm doing with these people is teaching them how to make that happen. And that's the part of, we're going to be meeting regularly. I see myself as sort of a teacher or a mentor to them. I know all of the sort of the tricks of the trade that they don't know yet.
Yeah. This is so cool, Debbie, because, there's so many benefits for you. I mean, just not financially, but just really for getting your teaching fix, because that kind of, your roots are in education and teaching. And so you get to do some of that as well as, working with interns too. But even doing this, you get to scratch that itch, so to speak. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, looking at over the years, I'm sure you've had challenges being a private practitioner, and perhaps even kind of making this transition. I'm sure that there were some challenges too. Talk a little bit about those challenges. What are some of the primary challenges for somebody who's either going into private practice or perhaps making this transition to group private practice?
Well, I think, one of the challenges of private practice is, you're really, as much as it's nice to be my own boss, it was a solo practice. And so a lot of times, you're really on your own. I'm lucky that I work, in a building where there are a lot of other therapists, so I can sort of talk to people and bounce things off, but that hasn't always been the case. And so, you've got to really develop a network of people who are your support system, whether it be to consult with about clients or, to just have it so that you're not, alone all day long.
Right.
So there's that piece. Getting clients. I mean, always being worried about, am I going to be making enough money? I mean, in the early days, I would calculate out, this is the minimum number of clients I could see in a week in order to just pay the mortgage.
Yes.
So there's that. Being frustrated. I mean, one of the things that is really hard about being in practice for yourself is the whole health insurance issue, right? You're paying a fortune for health insurance because you're not part of a group. And that, I mean, I could do a whole podcast on that, but that's an issue. And so those are the things. I mean, it's mostly, I think the fear part and the risky part for me has always been the financial part.
Sure.
Everything else about it I've really liked, but you do have to really put yourself out there to meet people and to have a network. And a lot of therapists tend to be more introverted, and it's hard for them to go out and to make those relationships with other therapists and stuff, but it's really critical.
Right. And really, I think part of this too is having a tolerance for risk, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've got to be, if you're somebody who's living with fear and anxiety, it probably won't work.
Okay. Well, what are some words of wisdom that you could pass along to therapists who are thinking about going into private practice or making the transition to group private practice?
I think first off is to believe in yourself and in your worth as a therapist. Mm-hmm. You've gone to school a long time to, you've passed the exams, you've got the clinical knowledge. If you have a dream, go for it. It's like what you put out there is, the energy that you put out there will come back to you. To try to, when you're dealing with the fear and anxiety, try to kind of the whole concept of mindfulness, just bring it back to living in the moment, deal with what you can do today, but don't be afraid to go after what you want.
Yeah. Don't let fear stop you. I mean, we just talked about the whole risk tolerance thing, but if this is something that you're passionate about and really want to do it, then go for it. I mean, because, why not? And because you want to enjoy what you do. And I've seen so many people who have been in agency jobs or other types of jobs that have just been miserable, that have always wanted to do private practice, but they just never took the step to do it. And, and it's
Right,
like life is
right.
too short, just go for it. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Debbie, how can people learn more about you and your services? Do you have a website or a Psychology Today profile or anything like that people can learn more about your practice?
I do have a Psychology Today profile, and that's under Debby Simmons. Our website is primrosehealingandwellness.com. And that is actually, it's being kind of restructured, but that should be up and running by the 15th. So, but that would be, it's a great website, and the different therapists are on there. There's going to be, videos, and there's
cool.
all kinds of stuff that's going to be on the website. So that would be a great website for people to go to.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure and put that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check that out, they can. Well, Debbie, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and introducing yourself to the Journey followers. It's going to be really cool to do this with the four of you, not only you, but with Amanda and Cindy and Lisa, and just to kind of follow you guys for over the course of this next year to find out how things go and what kind of things that you're learning in your personal journeys into your respective private practices. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, no, it's been kind of fun.
Okay, thanks. It's really interesting talking to somebody who's been in private practice for many years and is getting all pumped up about going in and transitioning into doing something different, into group private practice. Debbie said that she had been feeling stagnant and needed to do something else, and went to this workshop, talked to this guy, and thought, you know what, I can do this. And she went out and she's doing this. So I think that one of the key things to get from this podcast episode and the other podcast episodes is that you can do this. It's just a matter of thinking about the steps involved beyond the clinical skills. And I think that really, that's probably the easier part. Being the business owner is the tricky part for therapists, because none of us get this kind of training in school. And so listening to podcasts, reading blogs, doing your homework, and finding out what are the steps involved in putting together a practice, and what's the first step that I need to take tomorrow to do this. If this is your ultimate dream, your ultimate goal, what is it that I can do tomorrow to move me one step closer toward that dream? That's your challenge for this week. Okay, if you want to get the show notes for today's podcast episode, please go on to my website, chrisquarto, ChrisQuarto.com, chrisquarto.com. And you'll be able to listen to the podcast episodes, get all the show notes and all that kind of good stuff. And do me a favor and spread the word about this podcast series and about the Private Practice Journeys Facebook community, because I want as many people to know about this as possible, so we all can do our private practice thing. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and have a great rest of the week.